As horrible as the Holocaust was, Jackson sees it as a byproduct of the chief crime of the Nazis, waging wars of aggression. But according to international law, this has never been punished.
War making was not illegal. You were justified in making war. And Jackson felt that this was wrong and that the time had come for the law to take a step forward. This was the right time and the right place for people to express the idea, which was fundamental to Jackson, that war making itself is the supreme international crime. And aggressive war should be condemned as a crime.
Convinced that we have an opportunity to bring to a just judgment those who have thought it safe to wage aggressive and ruthless war.
In the final hours of the war, Adolf Hitler and his propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels commit suicide. The organizer of genocide, Heinrich Himmler, too escapes criminal prosecution by biting on a potassium cyanide capsule. As the Allies round up potential defendants, Jackson soon realizes that it will be no easy task to prosecute them.
He finds out that there's no case ready to go and that there's really not very much evidence connected to individuals. I mean, it's one thing to have a general sense of atrocities and misconduct at the governmental level, but a prosecutor needs individual specific items of evidence, witnesses, documents, etc., to go forward into court.
In early May, Jackson learns that Hermann Goering has surrendered to American troops in Austria, bringing truckloads of personal belongings with him. Goering believes that the Allies would accept him as negotiator. Jackson thinks otherwise. Now the highest-ranking surviving Nazi can be put on trial.
Justice Jackson made the decision that he would attempt to prove through this major defendant, Hermann Goering, just how a dictatorship comes into being. We conceived this idea. What happens when somebody gets control of a country and then goes into criminality? How does this happen?
Hermann Goering, one of the most conspicuous and notorious figures in Nazi Germany, will be Jackson's defendant number one. Goering's career begins in 1916 above the battlefields of the First World War. Bloody and unyielding trench warfare has dragged on for 2 years. A new type of weapon changes the face of the war: fighter planes. Pilots on both sides become idols, and their spectacular dogfights are legendary. The fledgling Imperial Air Service casts a spell on the young Prussian officer Hermann Goering. He proves an audacious daredevil and is credited with downing 22 enemy aircraft. In 1918, Captain Goering receives the highest decoration of the Empire, the medal Pour le Mérite. He takes over the famous squadron of the Red Baron, who's been killed in a dogfight. But the war is soon over. The squadron is dissolved. The end of his army career plunges Goering into a deep crisis. After fleeting contacts with paramilitary groups, he leaves Germany and moves to Scandinavia. The 25-year-old officer refuses to accept the downfall of the monarchy and despises the harsh conditions of the victors for peace. Our time will come again, he vows. Rockelstad Castle near Stockholm becomes something of a second home to him. The estate belongs to the Swedish adventurer Count Erik von Rosen. He is an explorer who travels the world. His love for Nordic sagas deeply impresses his new friend from Germany. In order to earn a living in Sweden, Göring enters service as a mail pilot. Newsreel footage shows him at work. Sometimes he carries passengers too. One day, he flew Count von Rosen to Rockelstad. Von Rosen is a millionaire who lives out his chivalrous fantasies in the romantic castle. And for Göring, the place holds a particular attraction. On his very first visit to Rockelstad, he set eyes on his host's sister-in-law. She appeared on the staircase like a Nordic-Germanic goddess, he remembers later. Göring falls so madly in love with her that he feels he's been struck by lightning. Karin von Kansau is married to a Swedish member of the aristocracy, but she soon responds to the passionate advances of the German pilot.
Hat sie wirklich geliebt. Ich glaube, dass Hermann Göring imponiert war von der schwedischen Frau. Sie war selbstständig.
He was truly in love with her. I think Hermann Göring was impressed by this Swedish woman. She was independent and spoke her mind. She didn't shy away from male conversations. I think that was part of the attraction. It developed gradually. The political discussions meant a lot to them.
Ziemlich viel, diese politische Gespräche.
Though she has a husband and son, Karin gets a divorce, marries her lover, and follows him to Germany. She shares Göring's nationalistic views, as he totally devotes himself to the radical ideas of Adolf Hitler. And Hitler can really use a war hero. Göring is assigned the task of leading a paramilitary organization. In 1923, he and his stormtroopers take part in a march which features World War I veterans. As so-called patriotic combat divisions, they are united in order to bring down the young German Republic by force. The early Nazis have their base in Munich, and together with other radicals, Hitler wages a coup d'etat against the despised Republic. On November the 9th, 1923, demonstrators approached the city center, with Hitler and Göring marching in the first row. Rivals, however, have sold them out to the government. The coup collapses when the police open fire. Badly wounded, Göring escapes to Austria, where doctors give him morphine to ease the pain. Hitler is behind bars and the Nazi party banned. The Görings are wanted in Germany, so Hermann and his wife return to Sweden. Göring soon gets addicted to morphine and is admitted to Langbro Mental Hospital in 1925. Eventually, he's put in a straitjacket. His medical file characterizes him as fervently anti-Semitic and a brutal hysteric, with a weak character, malicious to others, but sentimental where his own family is concerned. Göring checks himself out of the hospital after a few weeks, but the addiction remains with him until 1945. Following an amnesty, he's allowed to return to Germany in 1927. Once there, Göring immediately joins the Nazi Party, which Hitler has reformed after his release from prison. In his immediate entourage, Hitler is able to make use of the sophisticated, well-mannered man. He has decided to fight the Republic from within and selects Göring to run for parliament in Berlin. Berlin party chief Joseph Goebbels watches Göring's career with suspicion. He is a morphine addict, Goebbels notes. He does the craziest things. Sometimes he thinks he is Chancellor, at other times Minister of Defense. We have a classic case of megalomania. He urgently requires treatment.
Wie die meisten, die Macht bekommen, war ein gefährlicher Mensch.
Like most people who suddenly come to power, he was dangerous. He could be totally ruthless in the face of imagined enemies. On the other hand, he could be kind when you defended someone and try to show him that person in a positive light.
Eintrat und bat und versuchte, die andere Seite dieses Menschen zu zeigen.
In October 1931, Karin Goering dies of a heart disease. At first, her widower seems inconsolable. But soon, Goering devotes himself to his political career. He uses his excellent connections within influential circles to aid Hitler in his rise to power. When the Nazis win the general election in 1932, Goering becomes president of parliament. His opinion now carries weight with many politicians. Within just a few months, Goering wins the support of senior army officers and the conservative elite. After tough negotiations, Hitler is appointed chancellor. It is Goering's luckiest hour, comments his rival Goebbels. On January the 30th, 1933, Hitler presents his cabinet to the press, with Hermann Goering as a member. Goering has reached his foremost goal, to bring Hitler into power. They are determined to transform Germany into a dictatorship. 12 years later, after a brutal and bloody war is lost and more than 50 million people are dead, Goering will be the highest-ranking surviving Nazi to stand trial in Nuremberg. When the Allies take him into custody in May 1945, Hermann Goering still wears his silver-grey uniform with expensive jewelry and high military decorations attached. Goering believes that the victors will not be able to govern Germany without him. Some of his former enemies seem to agree and treat him as an equal. American officers even throw a party for him. They toast bravery and daring to the heavens. War is like a football game, Goering says. Whoever loses shakes his opponent by the hand, and everything is forgotten. Journalists are permitted to interview him. He gives the impression of a great man who has suffered misfortune, one reporter writes, and is now trying to extricate himself from the situation using his charm and wiles. Robert Jackson is annoyed when he hears about the lenient treatment for his principal defendant.
People like Goering were in custody of the army. They're in Europe. Jackson's very small staff is still in Washington. Evidence gathering needed to be done, but he hadn't even begun the process. So he at least wants the reporters out of the job and people like Goering buttoned up until, in due course, Jackson and his team can get there.
At the American chief prosecutor's request, Goering is finally treated like a common criminal. To put Goering and others on trial, Jackson needs to collect hard evidence to connect them to specific crimes. He is looking for signed orders or other incriminating documents.